Pay close attention. What you're about to see is Bible prophecy being fulfilled.
Welcome to YPN News, bringing you news as it relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yeshua Hawkins. Today we're reporting on the many demonstrations and protests that were held this week throughout the world. Egypt, Canada, United States, just to name a few. Topics of protests ranged from higher tuition hikes, unfairness in government, and issues surrounding the economy. Katan, let's first talk about Egypt and the misery and suffering that those people continue to go through.
Yeah, it's pretty sad, Jeff. In fact, 11 people were killed outside the defense ministry in Cairo, Egypt, which led to yet another day of clashes between protesters denouncing the killings and police outside the defense ministry.
An intense situation indeed. Military helicopters hovered over the crowds who chanted for the execution of the country's field marshal. Numerous injuries were reported as security forces used water cannons and tear gas against the protesters in attempts to overcome the continued advances of the crowds.
The ministry had issued a stern warning telling protesters not to come to the Ministry of Defense to protest, stating it will be at your own peril and you will be held responsible if you try to come near the defense ministry.
Now, continuing to look at these protests that took place around the world, YPN's Larry McGee has been covering the protests in Quebec as students voice their opinions on recent discussions to raise tuition hikes at one of the schools of higher learning. Larry, what do you have for us?
Thanks, Jeff. For the last 3 months, students in Quebec have been protesting in an effort to demonstrate their discontent with government plans to raise the cost of college education. For as long as many in Canada can remember, an inexpensive college education has been one of the hallmarks of their society, and many believe this explains student outrage at the government's recent proposal, which has sparked large-scale student protests and has turned violent on some occasions, leading to arrests and the use of police force, including batons and pepper spray. Many of the demonstrations occurred earlier this week, and the Quebec government is now attempting to negotiate with the students. If they are willing to cease their strike and halt the violence, then the government will allow them more time to adjust to the increase in tuition. In a statement given to the press by Quebec Premier Jean Charest, he started by saying that as he looked over the whole series of events that have taken place in Quebec over the past couple weeks, it has become clear to him that it is time to end the protests, for students to return to classes, and for everyone to move forward in working to make Canada's colleges and universities world-class. As it stands, Quebec is still the most inexpensive place in Canada to attend college, and the government says its current plan only proposes to raise tuition costs by $200 a year over 7 years, which would still make them the cheapest place in the country to attend. Yet for Quebec student unionists, who are demanding a complete freeze on any hike, the raise in tuition, no matter how small, is still and nonetheless unacceptable. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan, Jeff, back to you.
Thanks for your report, Larry. Now, the violence continued in the United States also this week as police fired tear gas and tossed flashbang grenades to disperse demonstrators in Oakland, California. Reports indicate at least 4 people were arrested when police officers ordered protesters to leave the city streets. That incident took place around midday when about 400 people gathered at the City Hall Plaza to march and to protest.
In Los Angeles, the demonstrations began early in the morning, starting from 4 different directions and then all converging later in the day in the financial district of the city. The streets of the financial district, downtown LA, were blocked off because of the thousands of people protesting.
The main themes of these protests were social inequality and police aggression. Even though Oakland police did use tear gas against protesters, that didn't stop them. They continued marching through the streets and chanting anti-capitalism slogans. Now, included in the protests is California's very painful problem of foreclosure. So far, the state ranks second for the worst joblessness in the country. California has been ravished by high unemployment and budget cuts. Now, protesters also rallied against income inequality, corporate greed, and the influence of the wealthiest 1% of Americans.
Now, the city of Oakland wasn't the only place protests were held in California. In fact, dozens of demonstrations took place in major cities across the state. San Francisco had reports of violence and clashes between protesters and police representatives. Now, all of this has brought about massive amounts of police presence in the streets, and even police helicopters were in the sky throughout the hours of the protests. You know, Jeff, history shows us that these type of protests might bring about a change in face, but the person's bred from the same system.
That's right, Katan. What they need to do is stop the protesting, come to the house of Yahweh, listen to the one sent, and there you'll find the solutions to your problems.
So for your solutions, stay tuned as Yisrael Hawkins brings them to us straight from the scriptures. For all of us at YPN News, I'm Katan Alexander.
And I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
Thanks for watching.